Hello. I'm David, and I'm a data nerd. Or at least I used to be, until I realized that there was other ways to use data that would have bigger and better impact than that. So I started off doing work around mergers and acquisitions and helping philanthropists to invest in the most effective charities, nonprofits, helping progressive candidates to win elections. Had a lot of fun as a data nerd. And then, I realized that if you help people to better understand things and help people to use data, rather than just doing cool data projects, then actually you have this much bigger impact. So that's what I'm doing right now. Particularly I'm talking about building a deeper understanding of data. I think in most businesses, this is a real opportunity to go beyond these analytical projects and really help people across the organization, not just in marketing or in sales, but help the organization as a whole to build this deeper understanding of consumers. And what do I mean by that? Well, I mean a kind of deep intuitive understanding where things come to you quite quickly, you don't have to search for them. Insights come without much reflection, or maybe without much reasoning, or having to wrestle with things in your head. This kind of deep understanding. I'll tell you about. I'll give you some examples of what I think that means and what it doesn't mean. And for me, this is a really exciting kind of holy grail going beyond data. I'm going to steal from Kate Bush, the singer-songwriter, and some of her lyrics for this presentation to guide us through the theme. Who's familiar with the song by Kate Bush, Deeper Understanding? Yeah, almost nobody, actually. Right. This is one of the things I love about working in creative industries like music or in books as I am now. Because for us, marketing is about helping people to find these great works that are going to touch you deeply or inspire you. So drop 99 cents in the break on Deeper Understanding by Kate Bush, and I promise it will touch you deeply, or your money back from me. So the song starts out this way. It's about somebody who's obsessed by a computer and starting themselves off from the world. So I turn to my computer and spend my evenings with it like a friend. This is how many businesses treat data these days. And let me give you an example of that in action. Who can tell me what these two beautiful codes mean? What do they represent? Yeah, right. They're hex codes. They describe colors. And the first one, 2A5DB0, is this beautiful shade of blue, as is 2200CC. And some time ago, Google had realized that on Gmail, one of these colors was used for hyperlinks, and on the main site, one of the other colors was used for hyperlinks. And being a data-driven business, they wanted to kind of understand this and optimize this. So they did a whole raft of A/B testing, I think with 40 different shades of blue. Different people got different shades of blue, and they measured click-through rates and decided which was the optimum color of blue to use. In my life as a data nerd, this excited me greatly. What a cool project, right? And why don't we do this always and forever? But I'm going to use it today in a different context, because problems like this and initiatives and analysis like this offer some challenges if what you're trying to do is to build this deeper understanding in an organization. So for example, this doesn't really meet any of the criteria of what we're talking about by a deeper understanding. Does the result of the experiment come to mind quickly? Well, probably not, because it's a hex code. Does it without much reflection or without much reasoning and inference? No, not really. Does it actually help us to really understand consumers and why that color, was the optimal color? Well, no, not really. And actually, the problem doesn't really apply outside of the tight confines of the Gmail interface. Given all the other user elements and color schemes that they were using, that might be the optimum color of blue. But when you take a different site or a different part of the Google experience, then that blue in that context might not be the right color. So a really fascinating and brilliant example of a great use of data, but one that's actually not helping us to build this deeper understanding. So I want to elaborate on that a little bit more. Let's turn back to Kate Bush for some inspiration. Later on, she talks about, well, I've never felt such pleasure. Nothing else seemed to matter. I neglected my bodily needs. I did not eat. I did not sleep. The intensity increasing till my family found me and intervened. Beautiful song. So I'm going to focus in particular on this part. I neglected my bodily needs. I was obsessed by this data on my computer. And, I missed the bigger picture here. I'm going to resist making a poop joke at this point, talking about bodily needs. But by bodily needs for the organization at large, whether you're Google or HarperCollins in book publishing, there's a whole raft of needs you have for data to understand your consumers and the role of your products in consumers' lives. And I'll show you how I think this misses some of that and will help us to neglect some of those. Problems starting from things like who's actually aware of our product in the first place and who's not, because they might be the biggest opportunities. Who's tried it, who actually liked it, who and how did they engage with it, who's advocating on behalf of the product. These are all data questions that are fundamental to the business and that need to be understood for the business as a whole to make progress. And then that data needs to be cut in all sorts of interesting and useful ways. So in each of those elements, like which types of consumer are doing those things and not doing those things. Because what's optimal for one type of consumer may not be for, or probably won't be for the others. How are they doing it? Why? And in which respect? Where are they doing these things? There's this whole raft of different questions, these needs that the business has to deeply understand consumers. This is exactly what we're doing at HarperCollins, for example, for each of our books and for each of our authors, is to start by laying this out, understanding across all of these different needs, where are the opportunities, where do we need to focus, and with what types of consumer. The 2A5DB0 example, I think, fits in about here on the diagram. It's definitely a subset of engagement. It's a pretty small subset of the overall engagement problem as well. So it doesn't build a deeper understanding. But also, it doesn't help us to address some of the larger issues and questions and needs that we have as a business overall. Now, if it's totally incremental analytical resource that's doing this problem, then absolutely go for it. Wonderful. But all too often in businesses, what you see is that the core analytical resource who should be addressing these bigger and wider issues of the business to help them to understand their overall opportunities is frequently being distracted by what seems like a critical or interesting analytical problem, which actually is just a footnote. So focusing on the bigger picture rather than kind of cool and interesting analytical uses, I think, is one of the really important lessons. And finally, later in the song, Kate talks about being lonely and lost without her little black box, her computer, or in this case, the data. I think this is the other reason why that story for me is such a powerful one or is so useful, because it's a clear case of where, without the analytical engine, decision-making would then grind to a halt. Once you've done a project like that, you suddenly start to say, well, look, I can't really decide on any colors without A/B testing 40 times. And what you're doing is taking decision-making away from people and constantly leaning on analytics in order to drive those decisions. Let me give you an example of where that's not the case and where you instead totally empower people to make decisions, but actually still really ground it in data. These are photos I took when I had the pleasure of visiting a warehouse in an industrial estate outside of Heathrow Airport last year. It holds the archives for EMI music, so master tapes and studio tapes and recordings back to almost the origins of recorded sound itself. For example, all the original master tapes from the Beatles recordings, all the outtakes are stored there, all these rich and beautiful assets. Miles of corridors, just in the same way as the Indiana Jones movie, all crates lining up. You wonder what treasures are inside. There was a treasure in here that gave me a wonderful insight into this topic. I heard about it because I bumped into a guy from EMI in New York, actually, on the street. He was from LA, I was from London. We bumped into each other in New York. And he had this big smile on his face. And he said to me, David, you're going to be really proud of me because I used your consumer insight the other day in a meeting. And I thought, yes. So I say, OK, brilliant. Like, what? Tell me about it. I'd love to hear. And he says, well, I was in this meeting with, and I won't name the artist, but the family of an artist that everybody in this room will totally love and respect. I guarantee that. So big artist. The artist is dead. The family are looking after the estate. And And they're so excited because they've had the archivist going through the master tapes from the recordings from late 60s, 70s, and they found these unreleased songs that no one's ever heard before, that were unknown to have existed on these master tapes. And they're excited. They're in this meeting, which is about the best of album they're putting together for him. And they say, this is cool, because we can put these tracks on the best of album and drive some extra sales from it. This is really exciting. But then my friend at EMI scratches his head and pulls a frowny face and says to me, you know what, actually, maybe you're not going to be that excited about my use of your consumer insight. He says, because I didn't draw any graphs, I didn't take any data with me to the meeting. He's feeling bad about this. So I say, well, don't be an idiot. You don't need data to make a great evidence-based decision. So I say, what did you do? And he said, well, I said to them, I just kind of knew, because the best of album, we were targeting at casual consumers, which is a simple phrase that should make sense to everybody, casual consumers, but also is the name of one of our consumer segments at EMI, so totally grounded in 1 million consumer interviews around the world. We've analyzed them and profiled them extensively. So he says, oh, no, the best of is targeted at these casual consumers. So it's great that you found these, but casual consumers aren't excited about cool new stuff. They just want low prices and products in places where they shop. Sales channel and price, don't worry about exciting them. That's not the point. We'll keep those bonus tracks and we'll use them on another project we've got coming up later in the year, which is more about the more engaged consumers. And he was upset because he hadn't taken a graph to the meeting. But what he'd totally done is built this intuitive understanding based on all the evidence of who these different consumers were. And he'd made a decision, a wonderful decision, on the basis of that. This, of course, made me smile. I think is the perfect example of building this deeper understanding in people and empowering them based on data, but to make these smart decisions on the fly and without having to lean on a spreadsheet or a graph in order to make those decisions. So this, of course, did meet all of the criteria for what I'm calling building a deeper understanding. And later on in the song, so Kate obviously recognizes that she needs a deeper understanding as well and cries out for it. And I think, I want to tell you, I think what that means in my world. It means, we're talking about data, this is data-driven marketing. It means starting with data. I'll use the HarperCollins example here. We've only been going for a couple of months so far. We've gathered already tens of thousands of really detailed, complex consumer interviews from around the world. It's an amazingly rich data set on people's interest and engagement with books and authors and reading nowadays. It's about taking that data, but boiling it down, distilling that data into things and conclusions that people can carry around with them in their heads day to day. So we have some consumer segments in the same way that many of your businesses do, and many other businesses do, but totally evidence-based consumer segments with clear so whats that they can carry around in their heads and remember and action day to day. Really clear handbooks on how to reach those consumers, what you should do in order to engage that consumer with your book, what you shouldn't do to engage that type of consumer with your book. Ideas and conclusions from data, but that are designed to be carried around in your head day to day. For an example, like the one I gave you a minute ago. So about data, but empowering people. And I think that recognizes that the kind of the simple model of the role of data in a business just isn't what's appropriate or applicable. I think it might never have been. You might say, well, data, you crunch data until it gives you insight, and then insight tells you what to do, gives you your decisions. But that's clearly not what I'm talking about today. And at HarperCollins and previously at EMI, we recognize that it's people in the business, day to day, in situations like the one I described, that are making decisions all the time. People with hearts and minds. And our job is to help them to have the data that they need in their heads to make those decisions and not to have to lean on the data too heavily. I, by the way, think that this is always how decisions get made, even in more analytical situations. In mergers and acquisitions, you would never do an acquisition without first doing a whole raft of analysis on the company. Of course, that was the part that I really enjoyed. but you'd also never buy the company unless you believed in it and you understood the staff and you felt passion for them and for what it was they were doing. There's hearts and minds there that make the decision at the end of the day. And of course, you need the data to help you, but it's people that make decisions. So recognizing that and putting data into that role in a business is, for us, absolutely key. So this is the role that we see data playing. This is how we think about it in the business. You have tons and tons of insight, rich and powerful, alongside the skills and expertise of people in the business. And we recognize, firstly, that the insight, and this is how the insight comes to be so cool, frankly, is that it wouldn't exist and wouldn't be so cool if it wasn't for all of the great people in the business who spent years and years working with books and authors, for example, at HarperCollins. They know their stuff. Boy, do they know their stuff. Not all on every other book and not in every situation, but each person is incredibly smart. So teasing out the issues and ideas and hypotheses and understanding that those people have built up over the years, testing that with data and supporting it or maybe challenging it with data, asking the right questions to tease out and identify those issues, and to scale those ideas and hypotheses across all sorts of other books and other markets and other consumers, that's the role of insight. And then insight goes back to people again, of course, and it challenges or supports them or guides them or nurtures them or makes them quicker than they would have otherwise been, or makes them bolder and more powerful than they would otherwise have been. But its job is to help those people. So alongside them, recognizing that it comes from them, but also goes back and challenges and inspires them as well. So this is the kind of role and how we think about insight alongside people. And I guess, ultimately, what is it that we're trying to do in our insight teams? How do we see insight's role in the business? And what do I think the role is? I designed the insight team at HarperCollins and previously at EMI to do this, to help kind of most people with most questions that they have on most topics that they're working on, most situations that they're in. Sounds kind of timid in some ways, but pretty bold and adventurous, mainly. What it means is that you say no to an awful lot of things. There's a